so much for joining us once again on the bright side. Yesterday we spent a bunch of time beating up on the China study, a study that was published or was written about in a book called The China Study by Drs. Colin Campbell and Thomas M. Campbell II. The China Study was a research project where the authors drew conclusions that basically implied that animal-based proteins like milk and meat and eggs are somehow problematic and inferior to veggie protein foods. If you were listening yesterday, you know that these conclusions were based not on the value of the foods themselves. Nobody analyzed the nutritional value of meat and eggs and milk and dairy. What they did is they applied statistical techniques. They examined statistical correlations between the incidence of various diseases and the consumption of these types of foods. And I say types of foods because the Drs. Campbell drew conclusions based on inferior versions of these high-quality foods. They didn't examine the food/protein value of meat and dairy and eggs. They examined the disease rates of people who ate processed and cooked and hormone and antibiotic and chemical-filled meat and milk and eggs. In addition, they examined the negative effects, experimentally deduced negative effects of a specific kind of protein called casein, C-A-S-E-I-N, which is a very problematic protein that's found in dairy. They didn't examine the whey portion. They didn't examine whey protein. They didn't examine the nutritional value of eggs. What they did is they examined statistical correlations between disease rates and people who ate inferior food products, and they did some studies or reported on some studies that were done with casein, C-A-S-E-I-N, this protein that's found in dairy that is indeed a problematic protein. Long story short, oh, and by the way, they didn't even look at seafood, which is one of the highest quality of all animal protein foods and a great source of essential fats and minerals for that matter. They didn't even mention that. So suffice it to say, long story short, cut to the chase, in my opinion, the China study is at best bad science. At worst, it's bullcrap propaganda. At best, you could say, well, these guys didn't do their scientific work correctly. For whatever reason, if you guys decide that you want to stay away from animal-based foods, if you have ethical or moral reasons or whatever, you're just going to have to do a lot more work to get your protein and your vitamin A and your vitamin D. By the way, vitamin A and vitamin D are animal-based vitamins. That alone should tell you that there are inherent problems with vegetarianism. You're not going to get vitamin A and you're not going to get vitamin D from vegetarian foods. Now, certainly you can get some vitamin D from the sun, and you can get something called beta-carotene from vegetables, and a lot of vegetarians are under the misguided idea, or practicing the misguided idea that beta-carotene is somehow can be somehow used as vitamin A. Sometimes it can, and beta-carotene can be converted into vitamin A. But many people, if not most people, have problems converting beta-carotene into vitamin A, and you're not going to get any vitamin A if you are a vegetarian. You may get beta-carotene, but there's no assurances that you can turn that beta-carotene into vitamin A. And as far as growth factors go and growth peptides go, you're going to be pretty much out of luck if you're a vegetarian, or a vegan, I should say, because these kinds of substances are only found in dairy and eggs. So beware, vegans. Be aware of what you're eating, vegans. You're not getting the good stuff. Now, if you're a vegetarian and you're eating dairy and eggs, you're probably going to get some of these things. And there can be a pretty good case that could be made that, hey, I'm a vegetarian, but I do eat dairy, I do eat eggs. So you are going to get these kinds of growth factors, growth peptides, and building proteins. If you're a vegan, you're going to be in trouble. I don't even know how vegans do it, although I do know there are some vegans that are living good, happy lives, and that's fine if you want to be a vegan. For most of us, a little bit of animal protein in the form of dairy and eggs and even meat or fish is in our interest. Now, all this being said about the China study, and I clearly don't support their conclusions, there are some good things in this book, and one of these is what they call the 8 pillars of food and health. The authors, the doctors, call and itemize these 8 principles, 8 pillars of food and health. I think they're well thought out. And if you apply them, they can make a big difference in our overall health. The 8 pillars of food and health are, number 1, nutrition represents the combined activities of countless food substances. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. This is very important. And I'm a big believer in nutritional supplementing, and I feel like you've got to nutritionally supplement, but when you eat foods, you get a synergistic effect between the vitamins and the minerals and the cofactors. The foods themselves are complete nutritional units, and this is why it is so important to get most of your nutrition from food, not supplements. And this is where pillar number 2 comes in. Vitamin supplements are not a panacea for good health. And indeed, they're not. You can't just take vitamins, people. You can't just take supplements. I got a message today from a guy who I've been working with for a year and a half, and I got to tell you, it's somewhat frustrating. He's got psoriasis, and I've been telling him for a year and a half, dude, psoriasis is an immune condition. Whenever you have an immune condition, something is getting into the body, and for some reason this message is not getting through to this guy, and it's not just him. A lot of people don't understand this idea that if you have something going on in your body, if you have an immune reaction, a defensive reaction, something is getting in. And I don't care how many vitamins you take, and I don't care how many supplements you take, and I don't care if you're gluten-free either. If you got psoriasis, you got eczema, you got autoimmune disease, your body is reacting to something you're putting in it. Period. The body's a closed system. Just think of a box that's sealed up. If something's growing inside the box, that means something has gotten in the box. Period. It's as simple as that, and vitamin supplements are not going to help you if you are assaulting your body from the outside in. So vitamin supplements, pillar number 2, vitamin supplements are not a panacea for good health. Pillar number 3, there are virtually, I should say pillar number 4, genes are not determined, genes do not determine disease on their own. This idea of hereditary and genetic diseases is an idea that disempowers us. Genes function by being activated, by being turned on or turned off. It's called expression, gene expression. They get turned on or turned off. And pillar number 4 is nutrition plays a critical role in determining which genes, good or bad, are expressed. It's called epigenetics. And we'll continue talking about this when we come back from our break. I'm Pharmacist Ben. You are listening to The Bright Side, and we'll be back right after this. Pillars of food and health, 8 pillars of food and health in the China study. Number 1, nutrition represents the combined activities of countless food substances. In other words, foods are synergistic. Food active materials, I should say, are synergistic, and that's why foods are always going to be your best source of nutrition, not supplements. You can't use supplements to replace food, and this is pillar number 2. Vitamin supplements are not a panacea for good health. They are not a panacea. If you got stuff you're eating that is causing your body to react, you're going to get psoriasis, you're going to get an immune condition, and vitamins are not going to help. They're not going to cure you. They may help you a little bit, but they're not going to reverse an immune condition that's caused by something that's getting into your system, usually through food. Pillar number 3, I'm just going to tell you what it is, but I'm not believing it. There are virtually no nutrients in animal-based foods that are not better provided by plants. That's not correct. There are peptides, there are growth factors in foods, they're in animal-based foods that are not in plants, especially when you talk about eggs and whey. So we're just going to skip over that one. Pillar number 4, genes are not the determinant of disease. Don't let anybody tell you it's just in your genes, it's just in your family, it's just hereditary. Genes turn on and off based on something called epigenetics. Doc Wallach has a new book coming out. I was hanging out with him a couple weeks ago, and he was putting the finishing touches on this book. It's called Epigenetics, and this is kind of what we've been talking about on the Bright Side for the last 2 years. I've been talking about epigenetics for a decade or more. Doc has been talking about it for 20 years or more, even though we didn't call it epigenetics necessarily. Epigenetics is the idea that what we eat, what we think, and what we feel turn our genes on and off. Our mentality, our thought processes, our feelings, our emotions, and our foods and our nutrients turn genes on and off. That means we have power. We have control. We're not condemned. This is so important, and it is so empowering. That's the bright side, folks. We have control over our bodies to a large extent, certainly to a much larger extent than we've been told and than we've been taught by people, by authorities, by those who would take advantage of our ignorance about the healing and divine nature of the biochemistry of the body, the body's ability to heal and regenerate itself, and this occurs largely at the genetic or epigenetic level through the foods we eat, the feelings we feel, and the thoughts we think. Pillar number 5, nutrition can substantially control the adverse effects of noxious chemicals, and drugs count as noxious chemicals. Prescription drugs, the stuff your doctor gives you. How can a doctor who is sworn to take the Hippocratic Oath to do no harm dispense noxious chemicals before he figures out what the heck is going on in the body, before he troubleshoots, before he does medical forensics? That's just the system we got, folks. It's up to us to take advantage of the power of nutrition, not only to reverse degenerative disease, but also to help protect us from prescription drugs. If you're on a prescription drug, that means you need nutrients even more than if you're not taking prescription drugs. You need nutrients, number one, to detoxify the medications, and number two, the medications require stored nutrients to be detoxified. So you're going to run deficient in nutrition simply by taking prescription drugs. So nutrients can help you, can help protect you from prescription drugs. And if you're on a prescription drug, you're going to be using up precious nutrition, precious vitamins, precious minerals, precious antioxidants to protect you from those prescription drugs. So point number 5, pillar number 5, nutrition can substantially control the adverse effects of noxious chemicals. Pillar number 6, the same nutrition that prevents disease can also halt or reverse disease. Nutrition can halt or reverse disease. Now, of course, if you're putting stuff into your body that's toxic, you're going to have to eliminate that as well. But once you do that, nutrients can reverse or halt disease right in its tracks. Again, this is so important and so empowering, and this is a message that we don't get from the medical model that has been entrenched in the healing world, the world of healing. We think we go to a doctor, we think we go to a prescription, and our diseases will be taken care of. Never has it happened, never, with a capital N, has it happened that degenerative disease has been halted or reversed by prescription drugs or by doctor strategies. 7, nutrition that is truly beneficial for one disease will support health across the board. Again, this is so important. You take your vitamins, you take your minerals for your arthritis, you take your nutritional supplements for your autoimmune disease, the whole body will improve. Your whole system will improve. Health across the board will improve. There's no drug that can make that claim, people. Only vitamins, only minerals, only antioxidants, only nutrition can do that. And pillar number 8, good nutrition creates health in all areas of our existence. All parts are interconnected, spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical. And good nutrition can help create health in all of these areas. I love these 8 pillars, with the exception of pillar number 3. And this is one thing that you can get out of the China study, the book, The China Study, which as a whole I don't agree with, but that's kind of a nice little segment, the 8 pillars of food and health. All right. One of the most problematic of the vegetarian friendly protein sources is beans and peanuts and legumes. And a lot of folks are getting their protein, vegetarian folks are getting their protein from legumes, soy especially. There are huge problems with beans and legumes, huge allergenic problems. And while no one disputes the fact that there is certainly protein value in peanuts and in beans and in soy and in legumes, for many people, this protein value comes with potential problems. Peanut allergies, for one thing, are absolutely notorious. It's one of the main allergens. I call it one of the main, the big 4 allergens: dairy, grains, eggs, and legumes, which peanuts are. Peanuts, by the way, are not nuts. They are beans. They are legumes. They were designed to be cheap protein for sharecroppers and slaves down south in the 1800s. They were, I shouldn't say designed, but they were bred to be good sources of proteins. Peanuts originally were wild foods that grew in the Andes in South and Central America. But George Washington Carver and folks like George Washington Carver that were working at universities in the South in the late 19th century, middle to late 19th century, they were looking for a cheap source of protein, and they came up with peanuts. Peanuts are cheap protein. They're slave food, and they're highly allergenic for a lot of people. All legumes are. All legumes, soy, beans, peanuts, all legumes are potential allergens. If you're susceptible to peanut allergy or legume allergies, you can end up with pretty much any health challenge, autoimmune diseases, especially skin diseases, psoriasis, eczema, mental health issues are a possibility. All legumes contain something called lectins. That's spelled Lectins, and lectins are super fascinating chemicals, molecules that we don't hear a lot about, and lectins can be a serious, serious health problem. All cells in the body, all living cells, bacterial cells, any cell that's alive is coated with a very thin layer of sugar. A cell is like, it's almost like it's got a little dusting of sugar. Cell's got a membrane, and then on top of that membrane is a little dusting of sugar molecules. That sugar coating is called the glycocalyx, and it's very, very important when it comes to immune diseases, especially in immune disease, even cancer. I'll tell you what I mean when we come back from our break. I'm Pharmacist Ben. You're listening to The Bright. Okay, so there's these, a cell is a living animal. Basically, you know, the guy who discovered cells, not invented cells, but discovered cells, Robert Hooke, he called cells animalcules, for a cross between molecules and animals, because a cell is like a little animal. When he first looked at a drop of water and saw a bunch of living creatures in there, he thought they were little animals, and indeed, a cell is like a little animal. A cell does all kinds of stuff. It's coated with a fatty membrane, and on top of that fatty membrane, you have a coating, almost like a sprinkling of sugar. That sugar is called the glycocalyx. And that sugar and something called lectins, which are found in vegetation, vegetables, beans, plant material, the combination of these lectins and the glycocalyx, the sugar, is one of the leading reasons why we get autoimmune diseases, immune diseases, and even cancer. And I will be telling you all about this relationship of lectins to the glycocalyx, the sugar coating on top of human cells and biological cells, the reaction between lectins and biological glycocalyx, the biological glycocalyx and lectins. We'll talk about that tomorrow, why that's related to immune diseases, autoimmune diseases, even cancer, and why you want to be very careful with eating vegetables and plants, especially if you're a vegetarian. We'll talk about that tomorrow, but I'll give you a little clue here. I'll give you a little hint. Glutens and the gluten reaction has something to do with this lectin-glycocalyx relationship. For you folks who have celiac disease or are gluten intolerant, you're going to want to tune in tomorrow. 866-582-9933 is our number. Time to hit the phones.